Hi everyone, my name is Gabe Mara. I am the media editor, and welcome to the Volume 6 live reading of the Festival Review. I'm so happy all of you are here, and if anyone still wants to drag in any latecomers, just please do so. Send your text messages now and demand everyone to show up. I'll go ahead and pass it on over to our editor-in-chief, Neal Tucker, and he will lead the evening. Neal, to you, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabe. Thank you to everyone for being here. Super excited. I'm finding more and more in lockdown that I need these sorts of events to kind of fill my spirit. So I am so honored that you guys are here and really excited about the event. So without further ado, give you the lineup for tonight. So we have 3 poets and 1 short story writer. We have Mario Dávalos, Tim Suermondt, and Diane Thiel. Those are our poets for the evening. And we have Danielle Talley, who's going to be reading an excerpt from her short story at the end. So what I would like to do to get started here is just dive right in. Mario, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor if you would like to start us off with reading your poem, Sunday Wish.
Thank you, Neal. Good night, everyone. Hello from the Caribbean here. So yeah, I'll go right ahead. So I'm gonna read a poem called Sunday Wish. So Sunday Wish. Despite the laughter, filling the cracks in the wall, the water erupting in tender screams and splashing over the red bricks and the orange towels, conquering the bare feet. Despite the soft shells and the loud words and the lost smoke, despite the leaves clashing like meteorites, doves feeding from agave flowers, tanagers flirting with unripe cherries, warblers and ferns, and the cool afternoon wind unknown to the citizens of cities. Despite the seeds fiercely attacking the forest floor, the ice rocking against the thin glass, the sips, the songs, the uncontrollable riot of joyous children, toes freed, hair damped, and teeth missing. Despite the crack of firewood chirping like rain or dry grass, the round table and the blue plates, and the ambiguous soul of the long, silent knife. Despite the slow roast, the hunger and the whirliness of stones, the weight of my arms, despite the fog and the vertical drop and the inevitable tragedy of Sunday, all my voice flee like panicking wildebeest, and I dream of silence.
Mario, thank you so much. Man, it's so good. It's so good. It's such it's such a beautiful, it's such an evocative poem. From the very first time I read it, I've got it up on my screen if I looking off to the left here. A cool afternoon wind unknown to the citizens of cities is just breathtaking. And so again, like I said, so beautiful, so evocative, the ambiguous soul of the long silent knife, the inevitable tragedy of Sunday, all of these turns of phrase, which you make look so easy, but I know are not, and are really, really wonderful. It sort of effortlessly does this kind of double duty where it whisks the reader away while also reminding them of their current circumstances, of their current environment. At the same time, it calls attention to the connection, or rather maybe the disconnection between the rural or the sylvan and the urban. And in all of this, it kind of reminds me of a poem by James Wright that you may be familiar with, Lying in a Hammock at William Duffy's Farm in Pine Island, Minnesota. Are you familiar with that poem?
I think I've read it a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal poem, and what he does really well, and what you do too, is that you sort of, like I said, you whisk us off. We have a beautiful sort of microcosm of a landscape. And it reminds us that there's something precious that seems to be lost or wasted when we're not communing with the world, or when we're not communing with nature in some way. And in that way, maybe it's a hat tip to Rousseau, I don't know. But your piece does the same for me. And that sort of struck me about it initially and has stayed with me ever since that first time. So I guess my question to you is sort of can you tell us a little bit about your inspiration for this piece?
Yeah,
I know you've.
yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much. This is this poem is it really captures my constant conflict. Like I find myself from my day job to my art life, from the rural to the urban, from trying to be in a family gathering to and dreaming of being by myself in silence. It's like that kind of ambiguous necessity and life that is always torn apart and is always trying to move. It's never kind of satisfied. It's always yearning to the other side, and it's how I found that my life has turned. And so on Sundays, when we go to this farm, and it's just everything is going well, everything is pretty around, but I'm already kind of dreading the end of this space, this time that I'm up there in nature. So as I start trying to, acknowledging that I have to go back to the city and leave my little cabin and my dogs and the mountains and the hikes and all this world, then this kind of feeling. So this poem was written into that scenario. That's like the background of it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it also, I was just going to say, I think we can all relate to the tragedy of Sunday and the beginning of a new work week.
Yeah, and then on the other part, it's always about language. Like Spanish is my native tongue, and I can write in Spanish. I write in Spanish, but I cannot write poetry in Spanish. I can write anything else except poetry in Spanish. So also is that kind of language thing. It's also like the same duality applies to that.
Yeah, that's such an interesting duality there between being able, first of all, being bilingual, but also feeling more confident or more fluent in writing in certain genres in one language and in certain other modalities in a different language. So I think that's really, is it that you sort of contribute that to being able to, feeling comfortable writing poetry in English, but not in Spanish?
I think it's very visual. I've tried to pinpoint it. What is the origin of it? I think because I went to art school in English, it seems like my visual thinking, it relates more to English than anything else. But I am not quite sure that is the correct answer. It's something that I've tried to understand. But everything I write, if I write poetry in Spanish, it just doesn't sound right. It sounds like I'm trying too hard, like I'm too close to the language. I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, no, I can see that. There's something, when I was in grad school, I had a professor that used to talk about being too close to the language or being too close to something. About it's hard to have that critical distance, and we all need that. But I think for you, it's almost built in with the duality of the language.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and then English, it has become, it's part of our household here, even if we live in a Spanish-speaking country.
Right.
And then I also find reading poetry in English, it's really much more enriching for me. So I think that all this actually had many influences in this kind of choice of language for genre.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, Mario, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Tim Suermondt. So Tim, I am going to pass the floor over to you. Tim is going to be reading from his poem, The City Is.
The city is slowly showing some light. The head-to-toe darkness it displayed months earlier no longer carries the days. The light is still weak, and as the fall arrives, a cascade color still clings, and a harsh winter forecast refuses to back down. But it is the spring that beckons. Crowds wearing light jackets and sweaters on the streets, flowers starting to bloom without a hint of sadness, and the sun beginning its rifts, gladly brushing everyone's hair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. I could say this of any poem, both in the volume, but also of the ones being read tonight. It's like one reading through is not enough. I wish we had time to go through and read it 3, 4, or 5 times and really, so that we could hear the wonderful language that you guys have come up with. Head to toe darkness, casket color, the sun brushing everyone's hair. These are just such wonderful turns of phrases. I personally find this piece sort of haunting and encouraging at the same time, which is, no easy feat. We're able to see both the present, the what you might say is the immediate future, and then kind of like the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, there's this joy, there's this hope, which, as the saying goes, springs eternal. And so I guess my question to you is, can you tell us a little bit about where these images come from for you? Or because to me, they sort of strike me as something that might have been caught, in the rather bleak news of the day. And what you've done is sort of transformed it. So I'm curious where the images have come from for you for this piece.
Well, let me just say at the end of February last year, my wife, Hu-Ying Wong, who's down there on the left, who's also a poet, we went to a bar in Harvard with a group of poets and writers and musicians, what we call ourselves the Cambridge Mafia, and we were there drinking and eating and hugging and and slapping each other on the back. And since that night, my wife and I have not spent any time with anyone else except ourselves, any substantial amount of time. So as the months kept going and kept multiplying, I thought surely this would be over fairly soon, maybe something like SARS in Hong Kong, 3 to 4 months. But here we are. And I remember early on when we got the word that take a walk is good, and my wife and I love to walk, we were walking around in the city that was so, what I like about cities is that the energy, the vitality, all of that was gone. Sometimes we were the only ones not walking down the city street. So I found that very, very odd. And of course, as the months went by, it looked like maybe we were coming out of it a little bit. We started getting into a little spring and summer, getting a little sun, and maybe so. So I wanted to have a little sense of hope that even though things were actually quite grim for quite a while, the hope that we'll eventually get out of it, and nature and maybe the sun will help us out of in that hope.
I agree. And I personally, in my own life have sort of thought of and experienced spring, the literal spring, as a metaphor for new beginnings each year, and so here we are with a new spring, a new year, and hopefully with this vaccine rollout, spring really will be truly the biggest metaphor it's ever been, the most realistic metaphor it's ever been. So we can tangibly reach out and touch and spend time with each other, because I'm the same way. My wife and I have really only spent time with other people on Zoom calls. So reading your poem was, like I said, it was a sort of a reminder of where we are and where we've been over the last 10, 11, 12 months, but also, again, a reminder to look forward to what is hopefully an inevitability, is that we will come out of it eventually.
No, indeed. Thank you.
So, thank you so much, Tim. And lastly, of the poets, we have Diane Thiel, who is going to be reading her work, Time in the Wilderness. Diane, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Neal. I will share with you Time in the Wilderness. To hear it, we have to be there over time, tune an ear to the song, sparrow at sunrise, the great horned owl at dusk, reminding us not to miss the trees for the theory of the forest, turning an old saying around a child's observation, the simplest question, opening the world again.
Wow, thank you. Again, as I've done, with the previous two pieces, I just return to the language itself, not to miss the trees for the theory of the forest. It's really wonderful. It's sort of like if Mario told us the story of nature, and Tim sort of, takes us nature one step removed. To my ear, this piece is sort of, to my ear, it's like it's shaking us free of the physical, only to have us sort of immediately come back to it. And it reminds me of my nieces and my nephew on the East Coast, and when they were little, it's that relentless why. Why with a capital W. To get to the bottom of things. Kids have this way of organically philosophizing, or at least forcing us to, and it sort of almost always must ultimately bring us back to the thing itself. And that's what I hear and see in this piece. Every time I read it, I feel like I get something else. But not to miss the trees for the theory of the forest just keeps playing over my mind. And I'd kind of like to home in on that and ask a similar question that I did of Mario and Tim's pieces, which is, where does that come from for you? And sort of as a follow-up, do you find that in your own writing, the answer to, hard questions is the thing itself? Do you find yourself coming back to the phenomenon itself in your answers?
Well, yes. And this poem, it really does come out of the thing itself, which is in fact, being in the wilderness, and being around the sort of those relentless questions as well. And, because I'm a parent and I've, been with my kids all for these last 10 months and, and I'm also a teacher and professor, so I kind of engage with kids in that way too. But the the poem, it does, there's also that play with kind of trying to turn old sayings around. So that, and that's what kids do too. They sort of open that up as well. So it's kind of, in many ways, they open the world. But the poem, I don't know, just sort of, it's a short poem, but each little couplet kind of, I think, stands alone also. And it's kind of built that way. I'm looking at it now thinking like, it's also, when I say the thing itself, what I've been doing every morning and every evening. I hike behind my house here because I live in New Mexico in the Sandia Mountains, and I can take the Arroyo all the way right up to the national forest there. So I feel very lucky to be in this place during all these months. And so that, because at least I can do that, kind of go out the door with my kids and walk up into the forest. So it's kind of comes out of those things. And also I think the wilderness I intended to be, or it intended to be, have a kind of many different connotations, so simultaneously. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, I was, when you just, saying you're a teacher, reminding me, you're a teacher and you're also a mother, and,
right.
which are both, educative in their own way. And it made me think too of the questions that we get from a child and the questions that you may get in the classroom,
right.
While they may be different in terms of the level that they're at, fundamentally, a lot of them are the same in the sense that they're trying to dig deeper. They're just trying to unearth something. And I think that unearthing is the things that great poetry does. And I feel that your piece has done that too.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that you can hear them in the background now. I said I like to stay unmuted. I mean, I like to stay muted because they're suddenly I was thinking, can they hear them? But I wanted to say that end, the simplest question, opening the world again. It comes out of those questions from the kids, but I think it also, in some ways, I feel like we have to ask those simple questions too, and in order to, open our own worlds again. So.
I completely agree. Sometimes it's the simplest question or the simplest turn of phrase that can open your eyes to the same phenomenon in a completely new way. So, Diane, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, we are going to hear something a little different. We have Danielle Talley, she wrote a short story called Lillian, which was published in volume 6. And she has chosen an excerpt from this piece to read with everyone today. So no spoilers, I'm just going to give it over to Danielle.
Well, yes, definitely no spoilers. So I'll be reading just the beginning portion of the story because, again, as you said, Neal, don't want to give away the end of anything. So yeah, just like the few for pages, and let me pull it up. All right. Lillian Burke stood by the attic window and looked down at the many cars that had flooded the driveway. She tried counting how many there were, which was tricky. The glass was filthy, patchy with dirt spots, and already it made things fuzzy. But the rainfall outside was getting heavier and heavier, thus blurring her view even more. Thankfully, the people who come to her house clearly were fans of color. She could spot the cars even through the wet haze. She counted them like she counted jelly beans. 1 orange, 3 red, 2 blue, 2 green, 1 brown, the rest, maybe, silver or black. Their surrounding lawn was a lush spring green. Lillian wanted so badly to kick off her shoes and go dancing in the rain. She wanted to feel the cool asphalt under her feet and the freshly moistened soil between her toes. She wanted to play hopscotch in the puddles with Jane and have a contest to see which of them could catch the most raindrops in their mouths. Of course, her mother wouldn't allow this. Mrs. Burke considered many things to be improper, whatever that means, and apparently having fun was one of them. She let out a tired sigh as she traced a smiley face on the glass. It baffled her how the sky could go from being so clear and sunny one minute to gray and weepy the next. The change itself wasn't what bothered her. Things change all the time, she knew that. They had to. If everything stayed the same, her dad always said, the world would lose its luster. Mr. Burke said that nothing new or interesting or beautiful could ever come without change. What bothered her was the swiftness of it, how vicious and all of a sudden it could be. It wasn't fair. The thought of it lingered for a while. When it did finally fade into obscurity, it left Lillian feeling bored. She turned away from the window and scanned the rest of the room in search of something to do. It was a big attic, only partially lit thanks to the busted light bulb. It also reeked of dust and old wood, but she didn't care. This was her secret spot, the one place in the entire world where she could do whatever she wanted. The room was littered with random objects. Stacks of cardboard boxes and see-through containers, a tiny red bicycle with loose chains and flat tires, a pair of folding tables, overturned dining chairs with yellow webs tied around the legs, a giant rolled-up rug leaning against the beam near the entrance. Nothing to get very excited about. Then there was the dollhouse. Sitting on a tiny nightstand at the farthest corner of the room, the little house was a near exact replica of the Burke residence, right down to the stained glass windows and the bronze handle on the front door. Lillian walked over and peered into one of its miniature rooms. A dozen eyes stared back at her. They were the eyes of pigs, horses, cows, and sheep, each carved delicately out of wood and given to her as a birthday present from Grandpa Morris. She hated seeing them packed so tightly inside there. She tried her best to make him feel as comfortable as possible after her stupid brother had broken the barn house. The thought of them being stranded nearly brought her to tears. Perhaps it was time to set them free. She placed her hands on the side of the dollhouse, but just as the impulse came to open it up, she had another one. She started to wonder about the strangers downstairs. She tried to guess what they were doing, what games they were playing, what stories they were telling each other, and what they looked like. Were they skinny or big? Fat-haired or pig-nosed? Were they strutting around in fancy suits and sparkling dresses? Were they having a costume party? Maybe one of them had curly red locks like her. Couldn't hurt to find out, could it? She decided to leave the sanctuary of the attic and carefully descend the narrow staircase that opened into the hall that led to her parents' bedroom. She went to the door, cracked it open, and clung to the doorknob as she stuck her head out into the empty hallway. She listened closely for any sign of life. Music. It was slow and faint, but definitely there. Something about it didn't seem right, but Lillian couldn't put her finger on what that something was. She followed the lure of the offbeat melody through the second-floor hallway. When she reached the top of the main stairwell, her ears picked up on the soft murmur of voices. Lillian tiptoed down the steps, stopping halfway once she could get a good view of the living room. She sat on a stair and peered through the gaps in the railing at the throng of people dressed in black. They were gathered like a swarm of crows. They spoke tenderly with one another, in tones that, even from afar, Lillian could sense had no real happiness in them. A few of them were sitting by themselves with drinks, snacks, or cigarettes, their faces pale and solemn. It was unlike any party Lillian had ever seen. And see.
Yay! That was great. Yeah, this is one of my favorite short stories that we've ever received, and
Really?
we get a lot. Yeah, it's really wonderful. And for those of you who have not had the chance to read the story yet, one word of advice: go read it. No, in all seriousness, if you're not familiar with the context, of the rest of the story, basically what we have is this very touching and rather tragic story of a girl, left behind in more ways than one. It has some magical realism elements to it without being overtly genre in nature. It really toes this line between the literary and what some might call genre, but it toes the line so perfectly. And so for fear of giving too much away, what I'd really like to do is just pose a question to you, which, in this story, for me, I find elements of loss, of course, but also of sort of the opposite, which maybe you might call finding oneself, and this thoroughly childlike understanding of the world sort of as given. They approach the world, they see it, and then they have this immediate reaction to it. And so for you, my question is, what is the central question of this piece for you? What does it, if anything, what does it unravel for you personally, or maybe even, I don't know, put it another way, is this an extended metaphor for the present moment, which it almost seems like everything is now. So anyway, I'll have to let you answer.
Well, actually, this was based on an experience I had when I was a kid, because my great-grandmother had passed away when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and I went to her funeral. But even though I knew that she was gone, I couldn't fully process what it meant for her to be gone, because I don't have a lot of memories about my great-grandmother. I wasn't super close to her, but obviously my mom, my uncle, my grandparents, and basically all my older family members clearly had more time spent with her and had more firm memories of her in their lives. So I think that's partially why there was kind of that disconnect with me, kind of being at that funeral and trying to understand what death was. I remember just sitting right in front of her casket. I brought my Game Boy with me, and I was just playing that at full volume. I think I was playing Mario Brothers or something, but because I didn't know what was going on. And so I'm just playing at it. And it didn't really, I couldn't really process what the funeral was about, what death was. And so that's kind of the central theme I kept while I decided to actually write the story. Also, obviously, putting in some more magical elements, or not magical, more fantastical elements in there. But it was mostly, I was sticking with the idea of a child not fully processing death, and kind of what their perspective would be if they just kind of stumbled upon this funeral, is not really understanding what's going on and how to interact with people, and things like that. And then I'll try to tiptoe so I don't give away the ending, but I also wanted to convey a sense of loneliness, because that's definitely something that I felt for a long, very profoundly in a long period of my life. And so I wanted to also convey that feeling of loneliness and of a child being lost and not knowing. Because when you're a kid and if you're in an environment that you have no idea what's happening, you don't know who these people are, you don't know what's going on, it's really scary. And it's especially if you're a child and you don't have a parent or a loved one right beside you, you feel like you're just kind of in this, it's like you're in a wild forest where, it doesn't seem dangerous, but you don't know what's going to happen. And so it's like you're trying to process what this environment is and your place in it, but also just trying to not or at least not able to comprehend the weight of what is actually going on.
Right. You touched on so much there. One of the things that stands out to me is that the main character, her inability to comprehend what's going on, her fundamental misunderstanding, both of the party and her misunderstanding of what death is all the more surprising, given what should be an intimate understanding for her. You know, and so it's interesting to see her, even in the place that she is, and in the sort of modality of being. I'm trying really hard not to spoil anything.
Right, I get it.
She should be fundamentally intimately aware of the inner workings of what's happening, and yet she's still, perhaps because she's a child, perhaps because of something else, perhaps because of her extended history, who knows? But she still seems to have that childlike misapprehension. You know, there's this sense in which there's a barrier, even for her, and which may or may not, you know, speak to this lack of understanding that we all have. What is death? What is life? You know, these fundamental questions that, you know, you could reverse it and say, here we are, the living. We should understand life because we're so enmeshed in it, and yet we don't. You know, so
Right.
You know, on the flip side, that could be Lillian's story as well.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to keep her very young. I mean, she was always going to be a young character, even when I initially thought of the concept for the story. But it's also the idea of like kids, I feel like, don't really fully understand their own sense of self in a way. Also, I don't have kids, so maybe I'm completely wrong. And I'm not around children, so maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. But just remembering back to when I was a kid, like I didn't have as much self-awareness of my own being. Like I wanted to, you know, watch cartoons. I wanted to go hang out with my friends, or go ride my bike and have, you know, I wanted to have fun, and that was the priority. And so it's like you're part of while writing the story, I was trying to keep in mind, to keep it at her perspective of, again, tying into the theme of not really being aware of self or environment or the circumstances surrounding everything, because that can be a really really emotional thing. That's a lot to comprehend. When you're a child, you're just not thinking about that stuff, and so there's a lot of confusion and uncertainty. But I tried not to make the story super depressing, so I wanted to make sure she still, even though she wasn't sure what's going on, she still wanted to be a child and have fun, but still keep those more mature themes, I guess I would say.
No, I completely agree. Danielle, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up all of the readings for the evening. I want to pass it over to Gabe really quickly. Let's see if.
Yes, hello again. So hello again, everyone, quickly. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to ask all of you to unmute. I'm going to pass that button down there. So everybody, please unmute yourselves. And when you have done so, I'm going to give it like a count of like 5. And then everyone, please applaud all of our wonderful writers and readers, because this is such, as again, a wonderful evening of wonderful writing. So in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I will mute everyone again here and pass it back to Neal. But again, wonderful job, everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome. Gabe, thank you so much. And again, thank you, Danielle, Diane, Tim, Mario. Thank you guys so much for being here and sharing your work and your process with us. Like I said, as this lockdown continues sort of indefinitely, I'm finding more and more that experiences like this really lift me up and inspire me in ways that I think many of us need more, perhaps more than ever before. Again, thank you to Gabe for working his tech magic, making sure all this happens without a hitch, and for everyone that was able to hang out and listen and share in some literary light and some literary joy. I hope everyone had as great a time as I did, and we cannot wait to see you all again in a couple of months when we do this all again for Volume 7. But that's it for tonight. Thank you guys again. Stay safe, stay well, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, everybody.